Hi, I'm Sandy Petersen, and we're going to talk about 3 rules to help you make your role-playing adventure scarier. These are rules that I myself use. Now, Lovecraft's favorite ghost story writer was Montague Rhodes James. His stories are available on Amazon and elsewhere. I highly recommend them. His ghosts are terrific. They're skinny, they're bony, they're scary. They are classic ghost stories. But the important thing here is that M.R. James didn't just write ghost stories. He actually wrote down 3 rules for making a ghost story more important. And for us, it's useful that these 3 rules can easily be applied to you as a game master in a role-playing game. You can use his rules to make your stuff scarier. So, the first rule, the horror must be malign. Now, usually in a Lovecraftian-based tale, this isn't much of a problem because his critters are pretty malevolent, and what M.R. James was really worried about was having a ghost that just wanted to tell you where his corpse was, or where the lost treasure was, or something dumb like that. Like, it's not actually trying to hurt anyone. Lovecraft's monsters don't usually want to do that. They want to go after you. But there's always a temptation for some game masters, I felt it myself, to have a monster who's like a good guy or helping the players or on their side. Resist that temptation. The monsters should be alien horrors that work well. This is one of the reasons I don't like it when people play monsters themselves. You let a guy be a werewolf or a vampire, and then it changes the nature of the horror to something quite different. Now let me just say that in my upcoming adventure, Yig Snake Granddaddy, I do have a Yithian who allies himself to the players for a while and helps them out for his own purposes. It doesn't make him a good guy. So what I'm saying is if you're tempted to have a good elder thing or something, don't. Now, it's okay for an enemy to pretend to be benign, or even to believe in their own purpose, feeling they're justified. Well, it happens all the time. I mean, the Nazis and Stalin's murderers all thought they were doing the right thing, or at least they pretended to think they were doing the right thing. So you could have them believe in their cause and try to convert players to it, but fundamentally, they're the bad guys. For example, the fungi from Yuggoth seemed genuinely convinced that carving out our brains and putting them as cans is something that we should want. Why wouldn't we want to have the freedom of having our brain in a can out of our body? Well, I mean, no sane human would want this, right? Which is why the brains in cans are crazy. Now, that's important to the plot. The fungi are saying, hey, we can reward you by taking your brain and put it in the pot. And the players are like, ew! Now, you could have an adventure where having someone's brain put into a cylinder is necessary to solve the adventure, do something. That's okay, but the fundamental badness of this should always be key to it. The fact that you're in an unreal universe of dreams and you're in a can and you're subject to the whims of the fungi should be a horrifying thing, not seen as a reward. Okay, let's go on to our second rule. Montague Rhodes James says, don't use jargon. Now, for him, writing ghost stories in the 1920s, jargon was like theosophy or terms like vibrations or auras or stuff like that. He didn't want you to use spiritualist New Age terms. But we have a very different problem with jargon in role-playing games, and that's that our games typically have rules. Rules aren't bad. They help you decide things such as, where is the elephant? Can I see that guy? Did I successfully climb the wall? I mean, if they're arbitrary, it becomes arbitrary instead of being a game. So we have the rules, but if you use the rules too jarringly, they can take the player out of the adventure. So for example, don't let the rules drive it. They're a support mechanism. They help determine what happens. But for example, if you're having a ghoul attack a person, okay, the actual physicality of that in the game is probably, in Call of Cthulhu, is you roll dice, you check to see if it succeeds, then you inflict damage. But don't, for heaven's sakes, don't portray it in the game as saying, I rolled 24, the ghoul hits, he does 4 damage. Instead, roll the dice, check the damage, then say, the ghoul assaults you, it claws your shoulder, blood flows, take 4 damage. The guy knows he takes 4 damage then, but the important thing, the first thing he hears is the ghoul clawed his shoulder. Now, Call of Cthulhu doesn't necessarily have rules for what happens when your shoulder is clawed, but you can still use this later in the adventure. Okay, you can say, you might even use it just like peripherally. For example, later on, say the player fails a climb roll. And you say, oh, I guess your shoulder's still hurting you. That's why you failed. And he goes, oh yeah, that makes sense. And it kind of brings that shoulder wound to the action. Or you can do things like, you can't carry the backpack because your shoulder hurts. You can just throw in things, okay? Another example, in Call of Cthulhu, we have sanity checks. So instead of saying, you see a ghoul, make a sanity check, you want to use some simple verbiage. I'm not saying you have to write a book, right? But you say something like, the ghoul leers. Somewhere in your mind you realize it was once human. Make a sanity check. And the sanity check is not the emphasis, it's the result of realizing the ghoul was once human, or whatever it is. In other words, don't discard the rules, have them serve you. Okay? Have them support what you're doing, and don't overuse talking about the rules and playing the game. M.R. James's third rule, and in my opinion his greatest rule, is to set the horror in a place the player can reasonably imagine himself to be. I've touched on this in a previous video about why I don't play in the 1920s, because it's harder to make the player believe he's in the 1920s. It's really easy for a player watching this video right now to imagine himself in 2019 because he's there. Now, let me give you a pair of examples. So here playing, I should have 2 videos, and one of them shows Star Trek. I love Star Trek. I'm sometimes worried for the heroes in Star Trek, but I'm never actually frightened or horrified in Star Trek. Why not? Well, the reason is that Star Trek is this clean plastic universe. Everything works. The universe, it's so different from my everyday life that I never feel I'm really there. I can't really imagine myself in Star Trek's universe. It's just a fun place to watch and to visit and to talk to the characters. It's not real enough to me to fear for the characters. Now, how about Alien? I love Alien too. Alien, even though it's also on a spaceship in the far future, feels realistic. The ship is an old tramp steamer. There's water condensation. The people act real. The people in Star Trek don't even have money. The people in Alien bitch about their pay. They don't like the working conditions. They get frozen with terror when the monsters approach them. So when they're menaced by the monsters, it hits home. It feels like it's a monster that I can grasp. Okay? Whereas when the Star Trek guys are menaced by a monster, I say, cool, a monster. Let's see how this deals with it. Is it going to get someone? But I'm not horrified, if you get what I mean. Okay? Even when a robot shows up in Alien, the robot, I'm not going to spoil it, but it's in a scene of terror and horror. Okay? It's scary. There's dripping fluids. It's nasty when the robot comes. You don't know what's happening at first. Interestingly, there's one part of the Nostromo that looks different. The computer room. Mother, they call it. Look at the computer room. It looks like it came out of Star Trek. It's clean. It's like claustrophobic. There's a little hall going down to it. It's all covered with nice little panels, you know. And interestingly, although this is a cool place, there's never any scary scenes in there because I think the director knew it wouldn't work. That's not where scary things happen. That's where the captain goes to hide out from the other people when he wants to worry about things or find out stuff. There is horror in there, in a sense, in that he finds out things from Mother, the computer, that cause ominous problems, but it's not actually terrifying. It's like, uh-oh, something's up, and then he leads back out and goes. So, when I say the player has to be able to imagine himself to be in the spot that you put him, I don't mean he has to be in the modern suburbs, okay? Alien works. A World War II scenario can work. A 1920s scenario can work. Just make it seem real to him. Don't emphasize the differences between his future place or his past place, or wherever he is. Don't emphasize the differences between that and now. Emphasize the similarities. Even if you're setting it like in the caveman age, humans are still fundamentally the same, you know? We got married, we had kids, we had families, we worried about our health, we worried about the winter, we worried about getting enough, emphasize those aspects. So, if you use these 3 rules. The monster has to be malign. Don't use jargon. And set it where the player can imagine himself to be, you will find your scenarios will be more scary and more effective. Thanks.